Welcome to the Insights and Innovators podcast from Market Research Institute International, where top research professionals share practical insights and innovation strategies to help researchers deliver more business impact and earn their strategic seat at the table. Today's episode is sponsored by Suzy. Suzy is the real-time market research platform. Suzy's audience-powered tools enable research from start to finish, helping enterprises make more intelligent decisions. Now, here's your host for today's episode.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today's episode of Insights and Innovators. I'm your host, Stan Stanunathan. Today's topic is continuation of a series transforming the insights function in a large multinational corporation. In other words, how do we make sure that the insight function is incredibly fine-tuned and future-proofed to create positive impact on the business? Today, we have a guest who has driven change at scale in a large multinational corporation. We have Elaine Rodrigo, Chief Insights and Analytics Officer at Reckitt. In this episode, Elaine shares her perspective on how she drove the change within the insights function at Reckitt. There's a lot to be learned from what she has done at Reckitt over the years. I'm sure you're going to really enjoy this session, and hopefully you'll learn a lot of things that you can take it back to your own work life on a daily basis. So, welcome, Elaine.
Hi, thanks, Dan, for inviting me here today.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a few questions about you. But before that, I want to ask your thoughts on the state of the industry. Can you tell me what are the biggest challenge facing us as insights professionals today in a world that is becoming increasingly complex, competitive, and is being driven by technology?
Yeah, actually, I think it is an extremely exciting challenge, actually. An exciting challenge around how we harness, AI and data and technology, exactly like you mentioned, with all the changes in tech, to actually drive what we've been trying to do all these years, which is consumer centricity and data-driven thinking. And at the same time, you also mentioned an increasingly complex world. And I just feel like as the world is getting more complex and more fragmented, we have an opportunity to create more integration within an organization by connecting the dots, bringing together different sources of data. So you kind of rally the whole company in this complex world, but in a simple way around that one consumer truth.
Awesome. Thanks. Great. Thanks for sharing this perspective. Now, let's talk about you. Why don't you give the audience a quick intro into your career and your role today? What's been your journey?
Yeah, so it's been 26 years now in the research, insights, analytics industry. I've been called that, I think, from market research to consumer insights to CMI to INA, really. I think back, two research agencies at the start, then built and led teams across 3 CPGs, right? Reckitt, then became Mondelez, then Danone, and now back at Reckitt again, and across 4 countries. So Singapore, went to university in Australia, and then also France and the UK, a couple of stints. So a career that spanned all that. Before that, I started in academic research actually for about 3 years when I was doing my PhD in Australia. So really almost 30 years now in the world of research. And then now in my current role, I always say, Stan, I'm actually doing my dream job because it's true. When in 2001, when I first entered the hallowed halls of Reckitt Benckiser as a very, very, it was my first client job, market research manager. I was young and kind of bushy-tailed and sort of bright-eyed. And I looked at that time, the global head of insights, right? And I said, that's what I want to be one day when I grow up. And that's the job I'm doing now. So even though along the way I left Reckitt for various reasons, personal and also professional, it's great for me that I feel like I've come back again. I've done kind of full circle to come back to do the job that was my dream, as that young researcher 20 over years ago.
What a wonderful, way to come back to a dream that you always had. Wonderful. Thank you so much. As you were talking, I just realized that we both have a lot in common in terms of her career, excepting for that academic bit that you had at the beginning of your career. But otherwise, agency and then clients, different clients all around the world. We have pretty much spent our entire area and insights function. Having seen the industry up close, both on the client side and on the agency side, what would be your advice to agencies if they have to become more strategic?
It's the same advice that I give my team, but I would say, always start with the business question,
Mm,
not the research project,
mm,
not even the research objective, and definitely not the research methodology.
mm,
So let's start first with the business question, then think about what insights and data we need to answer that. And then, finally you get down to the methodology. And
mm,
sometimes the recommendation might be not to do any research, but to use existing data, right, to answer the question.
mm,
So, as I said, it's the same advice that I give my own team as well. But I think it's particularly relevant for agencies. In 20 over years, and I started in agencies, I don't know if we've completely cracked this. Yeah. I think
mm,
we've gotten better, definitely, in terms of that partnership and collaboration. I myself, I suppose, am choiceful around the ones that I work with who can actually provide this, and then I suppose that's what I would say, would be my advice basically for agencies.
mhm. So you said they have made progress, but they could
Mm,
do better.
yeah.
What do you think are the barriers?
So, I always say that actually the biggest barrier, our industry, our biggest enemy is ourselves.
Mm,
We are like really good at sort of getting in the way of ourselves sometimes
mhm,
in certain ways. And what do I mean by that? But almost holding on to the traditions, let's
mm,
say certain things around, methodologies and sample. And rather than I think holding on to the important thing, which is really the most important thing is to make sure that everything that a company puts out there is truly coming from a consumer, right? That's
mm,
truly consumer centric,
mm,
right? Rather than focusing on the sample size or is it 99.9%, confident. And I think that where it doesn't work, and by the way, it can work a lot as well. It works for me very well in many instances, I would say, with my partners. But where it doesn't work, I think, is when people don't kind of get away from that. I mean, I still have people asking me about how much I'm spending on traditional research methods, versus the data and analytics. Like, why are we still having this conversation? If you think about it, right? They're
mm,
all different methods that we can use.
mm,
And when I think really about what's changed in the last 10 years, I mean, so much. I mean, you and I, as you said, we've been in this industry, you know, 30 for you, I guess 30 something years for me, almost 30 years as well. And it's really been the last 10 years that has just been this one wave
exponential.
after another. Exactly. I mean, it was first I would say it is all technology driven, right? First it was the DIY, remember the agile DIY tools that
Mhm,
enabled us to operate with much more agility and speed, right? And efficiency. And then it was data and digital as well, and how we could actually harness that to actually, as different sort of sources of insights. And I think I always say that what we need to do hasn't changed, right? As a client, as an agency, we need to deliver the insights for material business impact.
mhm.
But what has changed so much is the way we get it,
Got
the way that we get to insights.
got it. Yep. I totally agree with you. So let's talk about your current role at Reckitt. And you have done a lot. And I've heard a lot of your speeches in various forums in terms of, the journey that you've gone through at Reckitt in terms of transformation. Can you share a bit about, the components of this transformation journey, whatever is possible to be shared in a public forum like this? Yeah.
Of course, no problem. Actually, so we've been on this journey now for about 4 years. I'm coming up to 5 years back in the organization,
Mhm,
right? But I would say my team and I, we really kind of kicked off this journey at the sort of the start of 2021. Yeah, before that I was there scoping the organization, etc. And recently we did a checkpoint. What I like to do is almost every year you look back, right? And it was so interesting for us to look at our journey. Exactly like you say. And I look at it 2021 to 2023, the 3 year journey. And I would summarize our journey as consistent capability building in 3 areas of business impact. And I think there are a few words here: consistency, Now, Unilever is famous for talking about, the consistency, for example, in brands like Dove. Recently even Mark Ritson talked about the one secret for marketers they don't realize is consistency. There is something about that. And I think it's about consistency in terms of the capability you want to build, but along the way, obviously, it's like building blocks. So three areas. One is growth. The second one is brand building. And the third one is around data-driven decisions for spend optimization, efficiency and performance measurement. So those three big areas. And within growth, you've got innovation, as well as trends, right? And I would say over the course of my career, if I were to bucket the business use cases, they're largely in these areas. And then within there, obviously, you've got, different sort of micro cases or whatever, right? So what I did at the beginning was start off with what was on the mind of the CEO at the time, and the executive committee. So starting from there. And at that time, he's a new CEO. Basically, he wanted to drive growth, right? Now, to drive growth, you need productivity. You need fuel for growth. So I decided to go for those two at the start and then create, right? So growth and productivity. And then I brought brand building in the next year because I, as well, apart from consistency, I like to do one or two things, do it really well, do it deep and scale it. Yeah. Versus doing kind of 10 things and you're kind of doing it in one or two places. So that's been one of the things I've always practiced as well with transformation. So then, when I think about the growth, so firstly was identifying those three, growth, brands, and then data-driven decisions. Next was within each of them, creating like a signature capability. So there are lots of capabilities in what we do, obviously in research, but signature. And, Stan, I learned from you a lot from Insights 2020. I was like much younger then in my journey as well. And one of the things that struck me was how you branded things. You gave it a name, right? And actually, early on in my career, I had a VP of marketing who was my boss, who taught me that as well. And so the idea is to create one signature capability for each of them. So within growth, we create a capability of demand-centric growth, demand spaces. We internalized it completely. And what has come out of it is over the last 4 think about it. We now completely own all the consumer-centric frameworks that's the consistent language by category across this company. So over the last 4 years, we have covered now 12 categories, 17 markets, but we have created a proprietary database of 500 million consumer data points, which is now, as you can imagine, a gold mine to train all your LLMs and so on. So now that's an example of one of the signatures. So then you keep banging it home, right? DCG, and it becomes a brand of its own, a signature, and that actually our function is known for. The other signature was, maybe less, say sexy, but it's basically a global marketing mix modeling. Honestly, it sounds very simple, but you wouldn't believe it. When I came back here 2020, we didn't have one program for the whole world. It was smattering, and we decided to centralize it. What I did was, I think before that, it was sporadic because it depended on whether a country wanted to actually spend, you were going around with your begging bowl, the analytics team trying to get somebody to spend 50,000, whatever. And what I did was I basically pegged it to the productivity sort of work stream that the CEO had started. Yeah. And in order to deliver the productivity on media, they needed to use this. So because they needed to use this, all of a sudden it became something that was necessary. Then you create a positive self-fulfilling prophecy, where people start using it. So for both of them, right? He wanted growth. He wanted productivity. We create the signature capabilities, embed it in the business operating and provide it as enablers to the organization to actually answer the questions that were, I guess, the big business questions that were going on at that time.
Brilliant. I really like the way you provided structure, simplicity, and focus. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that. There's a lot to be learned because there's a lot that you can do, and if you focus on too many things, nothing gets done. So I like the way you provide the structure. And I think in the process, you really talked about 2 or 3 must-do things and 2 or 3. If you can talk about some of the watch-outs, that we should avoid, because that's a lot of learning because, I'm sure you have a few thoughts on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, there are a few, right? So number one, as you mentioned, it's very easy to get distracted. There's a lot of really interesting stuff out there. So
Mm.
I used to tell my team, I'm a bit old school. So, I still write on a post-it. So I wrote on a post-it, DTG, productivity. And then there was this later on, there was this, and I added brand building, but not everything, one thing. And I put it on, I pasted it here because it's COVID, no? We're staring at screens all day. And on days when there were just too many things going on, I just look at that. If it's not on that post-it, I'm not doing it.
Doing it.
So number one, I think, is to not in an organization, there's always some flavor of the month, some shiny new toy.
New toy.
And yeah, and organizational constant changes as well.
Mm.
I think you need to be agile enough to keep an eye and a ear out on the narrative
Mm.
of how people express something. But more often than not, you realize it's the same thing. People just expressing it a different way so that they can own it. Yeah. So it's like, but the capabilities don't have to swing like this. So I think that's the first thing about this focus and staying the course. Obviously, not with blinders. You got to listen to feedback and listen. But in your gut, I think you will know. And I ask. That's the best way. People would, like, if you want to know if something is working, just ask someone, if it's working, essentially, and whether people want to use it, right? So that's one thing. I think this whole trying to stay the course, but still staying a bit agile to a narrative. But as I said, how do you keep that, stay that course? The other thing is, and you speak, it's about this also proverbial obsession of people in our function about the seat at the table. But I think it's a good obsession to have, and you speak about it. I always quote you. I remember your famous quote about, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you're going to end up on the menu. Right? That was a point which I thought was a great one. And you're so right. But I think too many people in our function are so obsessed with it, but almost like apologetic, like, why am I not getting it? How do I get it? Why are they not inviting me? So I'm like, do you know what I mean? So I always quote you, and then I say, and my perspective is this: I believe I should have a seat at the table, but if for whatever I don't, and I've been in some jobs, sometimes you're stakeholders, sometimes you're in companies where I was not given one. Well, you know what? My perspective is I'm just going to make my own table. Like, I'm not going to wait around for somebody to invite me. Like, make your own table, make it so interesting, so amazing. Everybody wants to come and sit at your table, right? And that's really served me well in terms of, as you said, when you have the interesting capabilities that, by the way, create some material impact. I mean, who doesn't want money?
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to find growth? Like, I don't know how many people don't want that, like all of a sudden people are flocking. So yeah, so a couple of things there. I mean, a lot more, but I think those are the couple that come to mind for me.
So let's, move from, what you have done so far, having worked in this industry for 30 years. I'm sure, you have a magical crystal ball in your office that you look at every day. So what is your perspective on where is this function, where is the insight industry going? And therefore, what should we do today to be prepared for that?
Yeah, it's crystal ball, I'm sure, right? You and I, earlier in career,
big one.
All of us, no, we were expected to be the crystal ball. Remember? Yeah, I still remember. The great thing I must say is I find very interesting was, my early days in my career, I was always asked about to be that crystal ball. And interestingly, I think in research, because of digital, because of data, because of technology, we've actually gotten closer to that to some extent. It's become much more predictive, right? And over time, before it was hunching and happen, but now you can be almost quite close to the truth. And even if you're not, there's A/B testing and trying different things, right? I think that what will be next, it's not even next, it's already here now. Obviously, we can't get through this conversation without talking about AI, but it's a true thing. It's a real thing. And I have just found it fascinating how enabling it is and how much it can, for what we do. So give you an example, right? What we are doing now is, so I mentioned those capabilities we had built. So that's good. You have foundations now. For each of them, each of the capabilities, it follows some kind of organizational workflow. So let's talk about innovation, right? You have your typical kind of workflow in the company. And there are parts of it where you need insights and data for creation. You need insights and data, or you need testing for optimization, right? Before you launch, and then there's measurement. And we're looking across the whole place and saying, where in all of this can AI somehow enable the human being? But which areas, and in which areas is it, as we call it, like human led, AI assisted? But in some cases, like AI led, but human taught.
Mm.
And it's absolutely fascinating. So looking across all of them, so doing that for innovation, doing that for communications, doing that for growth, some of the capabilities that we had built.
Mhm.
And then actually going through it and then saying, which ones do I want to own and internalize?
Mhm.
Because there is a competitive advantage in being proprietary,
Mhm.
right? And differentiated. But which parts of it actually do I need to go outside to get a external view so
Mm.
we don't start creating a big giant echo chamber inside,
Mm.
right? So that's when you need the agencies. That's when you need the testing. So we need to go outside and kind of see what the world is like. And then we've got our insight with the proprietary. So this is the way that we've been progressing, I would say, over the course of this year,
Mhm.
end of last year and this year, as we've started, at least in Reckitt, started embarking along our own Gen AI journey.
Mhm.
And marketing was chosen in the company as the function to lead.
Mhm.
And insights and analytics, I think, because they realized very early on as we went through it, we realized very early on that data, proprietary data sets, would be a big thing.
Biggie.
And actually, guess where it all is? Most of it was residing within the insights and analytics group.
Right.
Because we have been building capabilities in a consistent way,
Mhm.
not jumping from this supplier, that one. And,
Mm.
to some extent, with some of our methodologies, we've been working with the same partners for 20 over years.
Mm.
It's just that the methods have evolved, and a lot of them are AI driven as well, right? So actually now as we embark on Gen AI, that's kind of the next area. So coming back to, I suppose, what is the next big wave? I think it's already here. From an agency perspective, I think the area of synthetic data is something that I've seen a lot more conversation over the last few months. 1 year ago, all the agencies were talking about how you can't use that. Okay, to be fair, I think it was not ready back then. Plus, I think probably they hadn't figured out what's going to happen to all their panels and surveys. But 1 year later, I was at ESOMAR Congress just last month,
Mhm.
and so many presentations were about synthetic data, and like 2/3 at least of the vendors that were actually there were all speaking about synthetic data. So you
Mm.
can see that's going to be the next interesting piece. It was also a conversation we had recently in the WFA Insights Forum
Mm.
about the fact that I think about synthetic data. And it was interesting. I asked the question, I asked it in Click as well in ESOMA, how many clients are using synthetic data today to actually make material business decisions? And the answer is zero. So
Mm.
none of us can. So none of us are using yet, but it's coming,
It's coming.
right?
Mm.
It's coming, and it's extremely interesting. So yeah, so kind of a lot going on, but once a lot going on, but I think once again, as I said at the beginning, lots of challenges, but like super exciting.
It is exciting. It is
Super
absolutely
exciting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, in closing, a quick reflection in terms of what do you think are the threats that we need to be aware of and plan for so that the function becomes even stronger going forward? Do you
Mm.
see any threats looming in the horizon for us as a function?
Well, I think as a function, in the past, right, you've probably seen that. I felt like 10 years ago there were these waves where we were like deer in headlights when things came, right? First, it was all about technology. When the DIY agile software, so all of a sudden we were a little bit kind of taken. The industry was taken aback by it. The consultants came and started doing, all the UNAs and segmentation we used to do, and they called it something else and charged 10 times more for it. And we just watched it happen. Suddenly we couldn't do any creative testing because apparently, the creative agencies had a perspective, and we just watched it happen. And it was last year actually when I was also at ESOMA or IEX, I think in Amsterdam, when I said, now Gen AI is here, and are we going to do the same? Are we going to just sit there again and just watch this thing happen? Are we going to not just ride the wave, but are we going to lead it?
Lead it.
And interestingly, Stan, I would say this time round, I'm quite proud of our industry. I feel like we're not just leaning back. We are like jumping in. and actually not just embracing it. Embrace means you're using it, but actually leading the way. But a very interesting insight that came actually from the CEO of one of the agencies at Esoma was when he saw the people presenting on stage, he said my aha moment is that it's clients. Clients are on stage presenting about internalization of Gen AI tools, whether it was Mars or Cook or Reckitt or someone. 5 years ago, Elaine, there would never been a client up there on that stage presenting by themselves about this particular tool. So, so firstly, I think I see a lot of leadership, which makes me happy. It feels like this time round, we are not going to be afraid of the tech and the data and so on. I think that the last 5 to 6 years, the way we've upskilled ourselves as an industry in order to deal with, with that has now positioned ourselves better for this, I guess, this new disruption, right? And an invitation for the agencies as well to not miss this boat. I would say that I feel cautiously optimistic because I've seen actually quite a lot of nice progress. Awesome. We're not completely there yet, but we're on a journey.
On that optimistic note, Elaine, thank you so much for an incredibly stimulating discussion. I really appreciate the time that you have spared today, and I'm sure our audience will find your insights invaluable. Thank you so much.
Dan, anytime. Thank you.
Thanks for joining the Insights and Innovators podcast from Market Research Institute International. Click subscribe to never miss an episode and visit us at mrii.org for more market research insights.